Hello,
Hello,
good
good
morning,
morning,
friends.
friends.
Uh,
Uh,
I
I
am
am
Percy
Percy
Turner,
Turner,
and
and
we
we are going to be talking today about implementing change. Before we get into that, there's a couple things that I want to make sure that you're aware of. This is how many? Is this the fifth? The fifth. I was right. This is the fifth in the Rising to the Challenge series. The Rising to the Challenge series is something that the Community Engagement Institute, a CEI, that's where myself and Zane May are working out of. We offer this a few times a year. It is free of charge. So if you paid anybody but me money, be very ashamed. You should have paid that directly to me. We do this over a variety of topics. Change just happened to be the umbrella with which we decided to mold this series of trainings, but we've done it over many other things. So if you're interested in more training or more of an understanding of nuanced topics, you can email myself or Zane. I believe that we will put our emails in the chat for you guys. A very quick aside, because it is in my contract to talk about myself in every training. I am a trained social worker. I am a master's level social worker, as is Zane. And so we kind of tried to approach the majority of our trainings with that mindset. So you're going to hear a couple inspirational styled things. You're going to hear a couple therapeutic styled things, but we are going to be focused on both the personal and the professional. So you're going to kind of hear me rubber band between these two mindsets. So I don't want you to be surprised about that. So, okay. We have an hour to do this. If you've gone to any of my trainings, you know that is my biggest obstacle, is just packing all the information that I have for you into an hour. So we're going to do the best we can to move through this efficiently and smoothly. Let's get to moving. So as you can see, we have a pretty robust agenda. Today, we're going to discuss misconceptions about change. We're going to discuss change as incremental in nature. We're going to discuss change creep, which is something that I have been really, really dedicated to understanding more specifically. We'll talk about the lens of incremental to deal with the change process and implementation. We'll also talk about various different types of change that we might want to implement. We'll discuss resistance. And then, as always, I'll leave you with a few tips and tricks, and I will let you go. So let's talk about some misconceptions. There are a lot of different framings of change. This is one of them. I call this the before and after change. And really what we do here is we kind of tell the story that change in and of itself is an abrupt thing. That's what these before and after pictures are. The sad thing about before and after change is it very rarely talks about that middle ground where all the work lies, right? When you see a before and after picture, you don't necessarily see all of the perseverance, all of the discipline, all of the suffering, all of the struggle that goes into the middle between the before and after, right? You just see that you can get results. And so when we talk about change, oftentimes we might focus more on results than we will on a process. So I want to be very, very specific about this, right? If you've ever been in that summer mindset, I know a lot of people right now, it's getting warmer. I hear the term bikini weather fairly often. And while I am a little too old and frankly too attractive to be in a bikini myself, I do feel like there are a lot of people who have this misconception that if I just do a thing, I'm going to go from one picture to the other. And that leads me to my next one, which is becoming more and more popular. If you've been on the internet, that you've seen this idea of this one weird thing, right? Just do one thing and it'll change everything, right? So there's a lot of internet ads that insurance companies are livid that a doctor somewhere that's not America discovered this one weird thing to completely cure blank, right? Dentists have discovered this one weird trick that completely changed and revolutionized the idea of tooth health and enamel health and all that sort of stuff. It is this concept that if you just do one thing, If you just focus all of your effort into this one weird thing that is outside of the box thinking, then that's going to take care of all your change for you. That's another general misconception about change, that all you needed to do all along is this one simple thing, and boom, everything will be different in your life, right? Um, Conversely, so change, it feeds this conception, this misconception that change is singular, right? So my favorite one of these, I have four children. My second oldest son, his name is Vincent. He explained to me one day that he lost like 30 pounds because he stopped drinking soda. And I was like, really? So you just like one day you didn't have a Pepsi, you woke up, then 30 pounds were laying in the bed next to you? Like, how did that work out? And he's like, no, I stopped drinking soda and I had more energy. And because I had more energy, then, right. So it's not one thing that you did, that's how you started. You made a decision to do this, and based on that decision, other decisions became more available to you. So you stopped drinking soda, you found yourself with more energy, and then you started consuming less calories. And so the work that you do, because he works with his hands, he worked in a shipping yard for a while, so he had a very physical job. So when you consume less calories, the physical job kind of continues to help you get into shape, and so you see your body changing. This isn't just I stopped drinking soda and all the weight melted off, right? There is a process in which change happens, right? And so the same thing is true in the professional sense, right? I hear this fairly often when I work with teams. Everything changed once blank. Everything changed once the supervisor left. Everything changed once somebody got a promotion, right? There's more to it than that. But typically what we do is we localize change, and we put the responsibility of change onto one big thing. And so the same thing is true even in the most extreme sense. If I win the lottery, and I'm pulling for you, I want to be very clear to any future lottery winners in the room. I believe in you, and I can give you my PayPal information so that you can help me out because I need it. Everything is going to change. If I won $100 million, my whole life would change. That's not necessarily so. There would be other things that would happen. You would be empowered to change your life, but the money wouldn't change anything. You would change things. You would consider things possible that perhaps you considered impossible in the past, and your decisions would change things, right? So it doesn't hang the weight of change on one particular thing, and I want to be very, very clear about that as we continue to talk about implementation and change. And so the other side of this is that if I try to change one thing, and it's really ironic that we do this. It's either change is only one thing and you only need to focus on one thing, or I can't change because I have to do everything different. So this idea is to change a thing, change everything. This is what I call a catastrophic mindset. So I pulled this completely from the ether. It has nothing to do with my own personal life. That's why it's so vague. I want to lose weight, right? Well, in order to lose weight, I got to go to the gym. Okay, well, in order to go to the gym, I have to choose to either go in the mornings or after work. Well, I choose the mornings. Well, in order to go in the morning, I have to wake up early and I have to change my morning routine. Well, in order to change my morning routine, I have to go to sleep earlier. Well, in order to go to sleep earlier, I have to go to bed earlier. In order to go to bed earlier, I have to eat earlier because I can't just eat dinner and then lie down, right? I won't be able to sleep very well. Well, in order to eat earlier, I have to push forward all of my meals. So, okay, I can't lose weight because I can't eat dinner by 4, I can't go to bed by 9, I can't go to sleep by 10, and I can't wake up at 5 a.m., right? So before I've even started, I have decided that there is an entire gigantic system of change that needs to happen. And if I can't start that system of change, then I can't change. And it's just impossible because I can't change everything. Right. And so this is the other side, the other extreme. It's either one simple thing or you're stopped and frozen because anytime you think of change, you think of literally everything in your life grinding to a halt or changing in a way that is untenable to you. So these are all misconceptions about change. So to review, change is not all-encompassing or radical. It's not singular. It's not tied to one thing. It's not abrupt in nature. Change is incremental. If you find yourself trying to plan ahead when it comes to change and you beat yourself before you even get started because you're so far in the future, 3 months from now, I can't do this one thing, which means I can't start, right? You're defeating yourself. That's not good change practice. If the change feels abrupt to you, it's more than likely because we're not focusing on the incremental nature of change. What we're going to try and do today is talk about how to get started when it comes to implementing change. And so we're going to talk about, in order to get started, in order to have the courage to get started, you need to change the way that you conceptualize change as a whole, personally and professionally, which is why, like I said, we'll be rubber banding a little bit between those things. So if we think of change as incremental, we can take some of the burden out, right? If change isn't radical, then we can stop trying to be perfect. We can stop trying to do the one simple thing. We can stop trying to do the before and after stuff. We can recognize that change is a process, which means perfection isn't going to be achieved in the beginning, right? That's not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to get to a space of perfection. We're actually trying to get to a space of normalization. And we'll talk about that here in a bit. Change isn't tied to one thing. It means that we can find multiple entry points. And what that means in a professional sense is that not everybody is going to change the same way. So if we're implementing a new program at work, everybody is going to digest new information at different speeds and in different ways. So it can't just be tied to one thing because everybody is going to internalize that a little bit differently. If change isn't abrupt, then we can let go of our self-imposed timelines. Now, that doesn't mean that change shouldn't have a timeline, especially in a professional setting, but that timeline should be more focused. And I'll give you some really specific elements about how to make that timeline up, but it should be more focused on set dates and learning rather than perfectionism. And we'll go through that. So the big thing here is we're talking about thinking of change in terms of increments. So let's get into implementation. Okay. So if you're in authority and you want to implement change, there's a couple things that you absolutely need. First, in order to lead your staff, you must learn your staff. Now, what that means is if you're expecting somebody to change, you need to know where they are currently. So ask yourself a couple questions. What technical skills are currently in use in our practice as is? What is going to change? What is going to be required skill-wise for people who are experiencing the change? What skills will be required to adapt? And then, is there a road where we need to be refreshing some basic skills? Do we need to be building new skills? Or do we need to be unlearning certain skills? And there's a reason for the specificity here, because we don't want to, and forgive me for using a colloquialism, kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? One of the things that we do with change is we think we have to unlearn everything. If we're getting a new system in, we have to forget everything we knew about the old system and we have to implement something very new. And when we get to the tips and tricks and resistance part of it, I'm going to tell you why this isn't necessarily the best approach, right? So what we are trying to do is find common ground between the skills that have been developed and the things that we need to learn. Because what we want to do is frame staff as capable of change, and we want that skill to work for them, not against them. Right. So that's only a portion of it. However, there are some other thoughts here. We should be thinking about roles because there is a very big risk of role changing or even some loss when it comes to roles. If we're thinking about people who, for example, hold informal authority in office settings, a lot of that is due to skill and time. Right. So if somebody has been there for quite some time, people tend to ask them questions. People tend to trust their opinions and that sort of stuff. So when we move into something new, are we taking some informal authority away from people who've been doing it this way for quite some time? If you're a supervisor and you've ever heard that phrase, I've been doing it this way for 27 years, right? That's an indicator that we're doing something other than just changing. In some ways, we're losing some informal authority. right? And we'll talk about that as we get further in. What's the current change timeline? I promise you, I have a whole section about timeline, and then morale is always something that should be in the back of our minds. The way that we talk about change is also the way we expect people to internalize change. So if we're talking about change as something negative, then guess what? That's how we are going to internalize it. If we say things like, well, we don't have any control over this either, and I don't like it very much either, and this is what we have to do, it's not necessarily what we want to do, then we can't expect for morale to be at an all-time high if we're giving people the permission to frame this change as an explicitly negative thing, right? So there may be some ways that we can modify the way we talk about it to keep our morale where it needs to be and to keep people motivated to adapt and to adopt new things. So regardless of what kind of change there is, and we'll talk about the different kinds of change, regardless, we need to be implementing a plan, we need to be communicating, and we need to execute, right, to ensure consistency and transparency of expectation. So if it's change that might be, we don't necessarily know, we think it's coming down the pike sometime in the future, then we need to focus on prep. So what this might mean is if there are new skills to learn, new programs to use, it'll be important to start building that repository of knowledge and direction and policy. We need to have those things ready to go. If we don't know whether this is something that's going to happen or not, it'll be incredibly important for people in authority to determine its validity outside of requirements. So often when we hear things like, well, it may happen in the state that we change over from X to Z, right? Or it may happen that new legislation comes down, or the people at the top of the pyramid might implement blank, right? The important thing to note is, what will that implementation do? And is it worth it to get a head start on this? Is there value in the change outside of the requirement? So a simple example of this is, let's say we are all case managers. Shout out to you, wonderful case managers. You do a very great job at doing what you do. We have some documentation standards that the state might require us to have more strict documentation standards, right? Okay, that might be coming down the pike. Is it beneficial to the company to look at documentation standards anyway, regardless of whether it comes down the pike? Is it important enough for us to have a focus on this particular thing, whether the state requires it or not? The more time that we have to determine, the easier it'll be for us to build a plan and to implement and to own that change, rather than waiting for somebody to force that change on us. Okay. If the change is eventual but will happen, it is really, really important that the timeline is done specifically. And I've outlined a 3-step process for building this. The first step is the introductory phase, right? That is when you're naming what change is going to happen and what the impact will be. And the focus of that is identifying the why. The earlier that we can identify the why and the stronger that we can make the why, the more bandwidth people are going to have to accept discomfort in order to change. Okay? If the why is just the boss said, and I don't agree, then we're going to have more of a rocky road. Right? But if the why is tied to our service, the why is tied to our mission, the why is tied to the quality of work that we do and the motivation that we have, you're going to see people more ready to accept the change based on how we conceptualize it. The next part of it is about education, right? So we're talking about what skills we need, what programs we're using, what practices we're going to be putting in, and we should be introducing these with a sense of kind of a gradual nature. And the big thing here is learning, not perfection. So in this phase, we're learning how to do things. And we're going to talk more specifically as this goes on about what that means, right? But we're going to focus on the process. The point is, did you hit every step? We're going to try and hit every step every time. Right? And then last but not least, we're talking about integration. So this is where we start to kind of normalize. So we have this new process. We're starting to normalize this as the standard process. So now we should be talking about set dates. We should be talking about shifting away from learning into competence, and then shifting from competence into efficiency. So at first, we're going to do every step every time. Once everybody is aware or is able to display competency in these steps, then we can talk about what we can cut out or what we can kind of modify to meet timelines and deadlines and that sort of stuff. But we have to have a clear understanding of the process before we start learning how to make our own and do our own thing. Right? So this is that integration part is really where we take what we've learned and we make it our own, and we make it a part of our workplace, our workflow, our culture. Okay? So if this is an immediate change that is effective immediately, and sometimes this happens and sometimes we don't necessarily have control over it, the thing that I will ask here, and I think the thing that people deserve, is a ratio between performance and immediacy. In other words, if I am going to change, if I'm flipping the script on you tomorrow, you don't have to be perfect by Friday. Right? So if we have no time to plan out, if we have no time to learn, we're all going to be learning together. So we can do that in 3 steps as well. If you didn't know, I really favor the number 3, right? So the first step here is accuracy. We should be focusing on that learning process and, again, completing every step every time. That's the big deal, right? Then once we get accuracy, now we can fine tune that process and we can talk about a reasonable and consistent workflow. And then that normalization piece, we're talking about what secondary elements are now in play because of this immediate change. What part of culture has to change? Who is emerging as the authority on this? Who's really taken this and ran with it? Right? We might have to, when we get into that follow through part, we can say, hey, it looks like Melissa, Catherine, and Erica are really, really good at this. So within the first 3 or 4 months, I want them to help me teach the other folks. What's the thing that you really gravitated toward so I can help other people learn? Right? And so once we start getting into that follow through place, we can start putting in new norms, we can start putting in new processes, and we can see secondary consequences for that immediate change. Very often, we don't see, when it comes to immediate change, we end up kind of recognizing the fallout of that immediate change weeks, months, and sometimes even years after the change was put into effect, right? We realize that other things have to be modified in order to normalize this well. So I just want to make sure that this is kind of put in front of you, okay? I know I'm cooking. I haven't asked for questions yet. There's a reason. I know. I'm cooking through this. Change is typically incremental in nature. We've already kind of said that. So when it comes to implementation, we want to build a model that honors the increments instead of it being, hey, there's going to be a new thing. Here's the date that that's going to go live, right? We want to build an implementation process. So here's an example of that. All staff should know how to navigate our new billing software by this day. The system will go live on this day. That is, and I've seen this before, and I'm not going to indict anybody, but I've seen stuff like this where they just give you the one date, right? Hey, this new thing is going to happen at this time, guys, be ready, right? So what would an incremental space look like? If today we got the information that September 1, we were going to be implementing new software, we might do things like build mock profiles. We might do things like loading things in so staff can get familiar with this. We might even do something like, hey, during our weekly meetings, we're going to take some time and just play in the new software. Look different. Maybe our one-on-one supervisions look different, right? That sort of stuff can help, right? So after that, we're talking about maybe getting multiple people involved. We might get IT involved and HR involved. They're going to collaborate on a document that kind of gives us what's the same and what's different between the new billing software, right? What are some of the processes that aren't going to change? And that's something that I think is incredibly valuable. When we talk about change, we also kind of need to anchor people in what's going to be the same, right? That also helps with morale. So then we give a date for that. So July 1, supervisors are going to start meeting with teams to answer any questions, walk through that new software. The month of August, we're going to start migrating people from one software to the other. That'll give you good practice. And then this is hopefully using that month to practice, using that month to transition. September 1, we're live, right? And in September 1, from there, we have to create new expectations. So it's just taking a stated date and building it out a little bit more to respect the idea that change is incremental in nature and people should have an opportunity to learn in an incremental fashion, right? So let's say, because at some point, like I said, we have to communicate change. So this is another big thing. When communicating change, it is so important that we determine purpose and we use language to serve that purpose, right? So here's some examples. I want staff to know timesheets are now due at 11 a.m. on Friday morning, right? This is language that states clearly, here's what's going on. Next sentence, I want to invite people to discuss. So there's decision language. That first is decision. Here's what's going to happen. That second is discussion. I want to invite people to discuss how to do this. I want people to know that while I'm a supervisor, I'm not here to bulldoze you. I'm here to support you, right? All of these are different kinds of language, and oftentimes misunderstandings and misconceptions come from language that was meant to be one way but stated another. So I meant to tell you about a decision I was going to make, but I gave you discussive language, right? Anybody here ever been voluntold to do something? Right? This is the conflation between discussion language and decision language, right? It would be really great if Zane did this thing. Zane, you want to do this thing, don't you? So far, that's all decision. I've made the decision that Zane's going to do this thing, right? So consider crafting your messages that invite discussion. You can show interest in that. You can ask questions. You can ask for feedback. And you can use soft terms like consider versus messages that highlight a specific decision. Don't tell somebody that you're considering if you've already made a decision. Right? That undermines trust in staff. And that will, at some point, put staff in a position not to want to believe you. Right? And I don't know if anybody, I'm sure nobody here has ever been in a situation where you thought that you were a discussion partner for a particular change or a particular thing, and come to find out it didn't matter what you said. The decision had already been made, and it was just a formality that discussion was there, right? Okay, so I've talked a lot. I'm Percy, I talk a lot. Are there any questions, concerns, or contentions? And feel free to use the chat. We do have a couple more people today, and thank you guys for showing up. So I kind of want to use the chat mostly, but if you do want to unmute and say something, ask a few questions, we do have a few minutes for that before we get into this mindset stuff. Any questions, concerns, or contentions with what I've said so far? Okay, we are about halfway through, so I want to make sure that everybody is okay. I'm taking everybody's silence as, hey, Percy, you're the greatest speaker we've ever heard. We're going to give you our, oh, nope, somebody said something, see? As soon as I said, okay, so Rajan said, all good. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, good. Yeah, because I was about to start making loan agreements if nobody said anything. All right, cool. So let's talk about the incremental mindset. The big thing here is there is change. There is discomfort in change. And so how do we dispel some of that discomfort? Deanne says something absolutely wonderful. Thanks for the information. There are so many unknowns right now. People are looking for information, but we don't have everything to share. right? And this gets into exactly what we're talking about here, right? Change is tough. Ooh, no, go back. My computer forgot it was a computer. So, okay, change is difficult because oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes, it uses discomfort as currency, trading it for progress, right? So, when you're learning a new thing, especially if you're going from a space of knowledge, if you're coming from a space of knowledge or understanding, and you have to kind of plunge into this uncomfortable space of not knowing, of being new to something, it's not great. Doesn't feel great. And like was stated in the chat, uncertainty, not great, right? I don't know too many people that are like, I don't know what's going on. Hooray, right? This is anybody here treat themselves to uncertainty when they've done, a great job, like done a great job. So I feel like I need to be anxious. Anybody here a horror fan? My buddy Zane is a very big horror fan, and that's his favorite thing, to sit in that what's going to happen uncertainty. And that's not my deal. So if you're trying to dispel some level of discomfort, when you have a goal that's appealing to you, when you have an ending that's appealing to you, try to establish a why. Right? And when you establish your why, use it like a shovel. Dig. Don't just stop with, well, it'll be better. I hear that so often. Well, it'll be better for staff. Well, staff will be happier, right? Dig into it more, because the thing about change is we recognize, especially when it's forced change or change we don't have control over, we don't dig. We just kind of stick with our surface level stuff. This program is going to be better for staff. Well, how is it going to be better? Why is it going to be better? And how is that going to help me through my discomfort? Because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to dig through our natural discomfort of change. Okay, so the why is your tool. And if you have a strong tool, if you have something that you really resonate with, that really matters to you, then you're going to endure more discomfort. It's going to work for you longer, right? Discomfort can take many forms. So I'm giving you an example here. We're dropping a familiar program for an infinitely more convoluted and buggy program. Again, this is just something I pulled out. It's not my own personal, it absolutely is. It's my own personal example because this is something that I'm dealing with right now. I can't stand Teams. If I could do everything on Zoom, I 100% would. The discomfort may be a loss of expertise, right? I'm good at Zoom. I know how to do a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know how to do anything in Zoom. I tried to mute my mic on Teams, and it required me to hold like 4 different buttons at the same time. It's ridiculous, right? On Zoom, I know all the simple shortcuts. I do all that easy stuff, right? And so when it comes to understanding, there is a loss of expertise for me. If I go and I transition everything to Teams, I'm gonna have to learn stuff all over again. I'm gonna have to learn new shortcuts. I'm gonna have to learn new capabilities, and I'm gonna lose. I'm gonna feel like I've lost, right? It could be in frustration, right? I thought I did what I was supposed to do. I don't know the process entirely. And so you see frustration with learning new things. I'm not getting it as quickly as I want to. I need the help files. I need help. And I don't know how many people here are comfortable with asking for help, but that's another whole different thing. We have a training on specifically that, right? Being able to be brave enough to ask for help, right? There is some normalcy after change where I might not know. Oh, absolutely, Catherine. Give me just a second and I'll talk about that. I may not know where I may not be good enough in my head to present on Teams yet. But I got a presentation next week, which means I have to learn Teams between now and that presentation. And so I really, really want to be good at this. I want to be good enough to be as good as I am on Zoom. I'm not there yet. And so there's some anxiety there. It could be the principal. Nobody asked me, right? I was just told, hey, we're going to Teams now. Nobody said, hey, does anybody see a problem with Zoom or anything like that? It's just the change didn't have me in mind at all. And so there may be some hurt around that. Nobody's going to listen to me, right? So as we get to tips and tricks, we'll get into resistance, because there's a lot of resistance that can come from discomfort, right? So, okay, before I get to the next part, I want to address what Catherine said. How do we find out how people adjust and what their learning styles are? Is this something that we can observe? Absolutely. But what I will tell you is, alongside observation, it is really, really important to have that open dialogue and skill inventory. And one of the things that people need to be able to do is authorize that they can learn. I can't tell you how many people that I have heard tell me in a coaching space, Percy, I can't learn this. There's no way. There absolutely is a way, right? In the same way that I can tell you I can't learn Teams. I totally can. I learned Zoom. I learned Zoom in the midst of COVID when we went from not having this technology at all to spending 8 hours a day with this technology. I had a lot of discomfort. But I learned it. And my success can be framed as motivation to my next success. Instead of it being, well, this is the only time lightning has ever struck. I learned this thing, I love this thing, I won't let it go. If somebody motivates me with the success I already have, hey, you did learn this, and I believe that you can transfer some of these skills over to learning this new thing. And we're going to talk about that very specifically. So we'll talk about skill inventory, and we'll talk about kind of making the bridge between the old information and what we used to know and the new information and what we need to know, and helping motivate staff to authorize themselves to learn. Regardless of their learning style, one of the most important things that staff need to be is empowered to learn something new and not feel like they're only losing. All right. Catherine, I know that that doesn't answer everything. I will continue, but I want to make sure that we get to everything. So if you have any other questions or further questions, holler at me. Okay. So if you control the change, it's all about digging into your why. If you don't control the change, then let's examine your relationship. Let's examine your reaction to it. Where are the pain points? How much discomfort does learning relieve? In other words, knowing that the pain of change is going to lessen and ebb, right, as you learn. The why could be to build a new normal. It could be to discharge discomfort. It could be to display your ability to excel at something. But if there is discomfort that learning does not relieve, we got to talk about it, right? What else is there? Because if I could just zap this information into your mind, if that's not satisfactory, then maybe some of the stuff that we said on that previous slide, the loss of role, the loss of authority, the fact that nobody consulted you, these things may be discomfort points as well, right? So, okay, we have to start somewhere, and that's a big deal, the starting line. Right? So the big thing here, we're talking about getting over plateaus to get started. During that plateau, we might find ourselves when you're learning something new, anytime you learn something new, I don't care what it is, there's a risk of plateauing, right? So one of the ways that this takes place is comparison, right? So we might be in a situation or a space where we feel like we're doing good, and then we see Merlinda over there doing great. We see Mary over there just completely having mastered this. We see Bailey over there putting everything together and just creating an amazing element. And so we start to question ourselves, right? Or there's another element of like time. Well, we have this internal clock of I should get this, I should know this by a certain time. And if I don't, then I start to judge myself, right? And so we have to be very, very clear and honest about our expectations internally, right? There are also some expectations that are put forward, but we already kind of talked about that. An effective method for dispelling this is to remember where you started. Anybody here ever let's say try to learn a new language? Anybody here use Duolingo? I've been using Duolingo for a year and about 10 days now. And I don't know anything about the language that I'm trying to learn. I'm terrible at it, right? But if I go back to the first lesson, I can pass that like a breeze, right? So I feel like I don't know anything, but in actuality, if I go back to my square one, I will see how far I've come. I can say a lot of things that I couldn't say before. I can understand a lot of things I didn't understand before. I can even write some of the letters that I couldn't have done before, right? But it feels, because change is difficult, it feels like I'm not making any progress because everything new that I learn is just as difficult as the last new thing I learned. But when I go back to square one, and this is a big thing, you have to remind yourself of how far you've come. Okay, let's keep going. So sometimes change might feel too big. So we're talking about establishing a routine. Establishing that routine can help dispel fear by creating a consistent, repeatable, and sustainable element that helps you keep learning. And the thing about a routine is it's not going to give you any big bursts of genius. It's about discipline. It's about keeping it going. It's about doing the steps. That's what we're looking for. We want to normalize and integrate new learning. It's not about being a genius. It's not about being ultra productive. It's about learning and building a foundation of learning so that we can get to that point. But you can't rush yourself. So I'm going to give you an example, but I want to keep moving. The program that I am in requires I work for long times entering information. It saves manually, which means if I'm not paying attention, I can lose hours worth of work. Considering I'm still learning the program, it's really, really important that I save my work frequently. So what's a routine that I can put in place to mitigate this? Right? I could set an alarms. I can, anytime I get up from my desk, that can be something that I do. If I have to go to the bathroom, save real quick. If I have to, anything, right? In the beginning, in the morning, anything like that, if I stretch, I save. Anytime I move from my computer, I save. These are simple routines that can help us build a habit around something, right? So that's kind of what we're doing here is we're talking about building a routine to augment our learning. So evaluation is super, super important as we are learning through, and even just, you might not have researchers, you might not have the ability to formally evaluate, to create a survey around it, but just talking to people, where are we at, right? Not in terms of, and not in relation to a set date, but just evaluating people to celebrate their progress, giving them, and I told you before that getting back to square one and realizing how far you've come is super important. This can also help you modify routines, right? And like I said, it can be formal or informal. Personal evaluation can also, if you're just doing this by yourself, there can be a lack of accountability there. So make sure that you have somebody in your office or somebody, even your supervisor sometimes, that can help you with an accountability plan or an evaluative plan. Okay, so give me a second. We'll get back to this activity if we have time, but I want to make sure that I get to everything. Okay, so this is the thing, right? Some of you have signed into this specifically so you can be like, how do I get Sally to accept the new change? Because Sally is the most horrible person. Anytime I say anything about change, Sally just throws up all these roadblocks, and I don't know how to deal with it, right? So let's talk about some adjacent things to change. Change might be asking somebody to leave behind knowledge or something that they're proud of without acknowledgement, right? So Sally, in this particular case, and I want to be very clear to anybody named Sally or who has a loved one named Sally. I don't know Sally. I don't know. It's not that person you're thinking of. That's just a name I pulled out of the ether. Okay. So we might be asking Sally to leave behind something they're proud of. And if we don't know Sally's skills and we don't know how Sally thinks of herself professionally, then we are not going to recognize where that resistance is coming from. It might be asking somebody to figure it out and feel like they are not supported. Right. So it's not the change that matters. It's the way that it was communicated to me was, we're going to change on this date. Good luck, figure it out and move forward. Right. And that the way that it was done creates resistance. It could be that somebody's perspective of self shifts. I was confident in this. I'm confident using Zoom. I'm not confident using Teams. Right? So in that regard, when you're telling me I have to change, you're also telling me that I have to shift from being confident in myself to being unsure of myself. And I don't know too many people who wouldn't resist that. Right? So Ask yourself about the purpose. And when you're feeling brave, ask them about the purpose. Is it about being heard? Is it about being acknowledged? Is it about the actual change being rescinded? Right? Oftentimes, when we have people talking about change, and I'm sure that a few of you have experienced this, where a complaint starts and all you do is sit there. I don't know if anybody here has ever taken phone calls before or anything like that, but I've been in many situations where somebody has complained themselves around to the answer and then hung up the phone and thanked me for doing absolutely nothing but sitting there quietly and listening to them work it out. But somebody needed to listen to them in order for that to happen. Right. So anytime I shut it down and said, nah, I'm not going to listen to your negativity. We're just going to do this. You're just going to have to bare your teeth and figure it out. That creates more resistance. If I listen to them, oftentimes people will talk themselves around to where they need to be. Now, not all the time, but are they looking for learning or support? We talked about the fact that a lot of people aren't always authorized to ask for support or for help. A lot of people think that that's a sign of weakness. So that asking for help might sound like resistance. And we've already talked about the idea that people might be at odds with something other than the change itself. Like, I wasn't consulted, like no one considers me, like I've been here for 30 years and it feels like you're trying to just push me out because I'm part of the old regime. All of these things are not really linked to the change themselves. It's a bigger issue that we need to discuss. It's just coming out here. Right? Another element about this is when we're considering their purpose. Oh, I don't know why this is twice. Well, consider your purpose there at the bottom. Do you need compliance? Do you need people to do what you want the way that you want it, or do you need people to believe in the change? Those are two different things. Do you need people to just shut up and do the work? And if you do, how is that being communicated? Right? Or do you need people to really believe in the work? Do you want people to have a smile on their face while they do the change? Right? There are plenty of people out there who will begrudgingly do the best work you've ever seen in your life. They're just not going to be happy about it, right? Do you need them to be happy about it? Is that important to you? Is it more about your supervision and less about the change? You're not listening to me. I've said something. I'm your supervisor, and there's some insubordination going on here. We've already talked about authority and that tie. There's also kind of maybe there's a mutual understanding through discussion here that can be happened. But again, what we're trying to figure out is, what's your purpose? What do you want from these people? If there is resistance, what does success look like to you? All right. So one of the things when we're trying to get people to start, always connect things to a story of success rather than consequence. Don't tell me what's going to happen if I fail. Show me how I've succeeded in the past and help me use that as a motivator to authorize me to succeed again. So often we shy away from change and we forget the successes that we've had in the past. If we can remember those successes, that's going to help us motivate. That's going to help us stay engaged. Routine, we've already kind of talked about, right? We should always be slightly beyond our means when it comes to creating a routine around change. We want to always make it feel like it's difficult, so we are accomplishing. We never get bored of it. We never, so we are always adding just another new little element. Once we feel like we've gotten something down pat, then we want to move on to the next thing. Add that bit by bit. Incremental change is the way, friends. We've already talked about evaluation. Talk to somebody. Have a partner when it comes to change. Do not change alone. Even if the person isn't privy to the changes that you have to go through, being able to talk about your experience, being able to share, being able to vent, all of these things are very, very important. Okay? Remember that you want to modify your plan. You want to talk to somebody. Get it out of your head. Right? You want to always review your basic skills. Whatever you're learning, you always want to go back to square one. Make sure that those things are still sharp, right? It keeps you humble. Also, if you're somebody who has a certain level of mastery, as you learn, you might see new people coming into this change. That will help you also identify with them. What are those building blocks that they need to develop, right? As you get more comfortable with change as an incremental thing, you can be a great example of how to put change in this lens so that people can digest it. Because change often seems too big to digest. So if you do it in this incremental way, you can be a good example and a good support to others who have to go through change. Okay, we did it. We got 10 minutes. Now, let's get to our questions. Let's get to our contentions. Let's do all of that. Let's have the discussion around implementing change. What are some things that have come up for you that you feel like, okay, answer this for me or help me work through this? Let's talk about it. Also, if you got nothing, friends, thank you so much for being here with me. I am so, so humbled by the fact that people are even here listening to me talk about this. Uh, if you have no questions or concerns, please take 10 minutes and do zero work. You were supposed to be here for another 10 minutes, right? So I don't care if your supervisor's here, I don't care if your ED is here, you heard me say it. Do absolutely no work for 9 minutes and 15 seconds, and then get back to doing the fantastic things that you do. Thank you guys so much. Get out of here, have some good work, have some good lunch. We'll see you next time. Deanne, stay here if you want me to answer that. I would love to answer that for you. Absolutely. So, what Deanne is talking about here, within a team, there are often different archetypes. I agree. I am one who tries to inspire hope, but there are others who are less hopeful. Can you speak to other types of folks? Absolutely, I can. So, one of the really, really important things is recognizing and understanding the journey that's gotten people to where they are now. Some people have a very different change. Is there an email? Oh, we should have sent that out. I'm so sorry I didn't mention it before I told people to go. Zane's gonna email the evaluation out. So okay, when some people have a different relationship with change. For some people, change is adjacent to failure. And so there is a loss of hope when change has been immediate and not communicated well. Change has eroded trust in organizations or in personal relationships. There are a lot of elements of the story of a person. And unfortunately, the professional roles that we have are often linked to the personal spaces that we occupy, right? So what I would say to you, Deanne, and what's really, really important if you're trying to help somebody understand hope, again, always start with the successes that they have. And one of the things that I like to do is target absolute language. A lot of people who struggle with hope give you absolutist language. It's always like this. They always blank, blank, blank. No one ever finishes blank, 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 right? Do you know what I'm talking about when I say that? The absolute language does a whole lot of work for folks. And usually it's to occupy a space of safety. For them, hope is dangerous. It's not a positive thing. It is something that opens them up and makes them vulnerable. They believe they can do, they learn that they can't, it changes them forever, right? Do you hear that absolutist language? It changes them forever. That's not true, but that's how it feels, right? So sometimes when you're in that space and you're talking to somebody, call out some of that absolute language. They'll never, I'll never get this. I hear that very often. I'll never get it. I'll never understand how. I'll never get why, right? The word never does a lot of heavy lifting there. We have a really great communication, positive communication training that can really kind of help you dig into this, Deanne. If you'd love to, if you want to talk about that a little bit further, I would love to give it to you. But I will tell you that is one big thing to do is listen to the way that people talk and just ask the language. You're using a lot of really absolute terms. Help me understand how the word never really works here. If you think that this will never get any better, or that leadership will always ignore you, or anything like that, right? And then the other thing is, what successes have they had that you can use that you're not asking them to hope in you, you're asking them to hope in themselves. You're asking them to have faith in themselves, not in the program, not in you, not in leadership, but you're giving them successes and you're telling them, this wasn't me. This was you. You did this, right? In the same way that I talked about myself in Zoom, I can say the way to motivate me to get more involved in teams is to convince me or to show me the success I've had in Zoom. There was a point where I didn't know anything about Zoom either, and I learned about it, and that success really helped me, right? Deanne says that's super helpful in public health right now. People getting pretty bleak. I'm trying to see things as opportunities to reclaim spaces and hustle so that we can capture new allies. Love this, right? So even that concept that people are getting pretty bleak right now, I believe it. And listen, if I had a training that could help us kind of internalize what's going on right now, boy, oh boy, nothing would make me happier than to be able to say, here's how you deal with blank, right? However, what's important to note here is that we're talking about your skills. The world is changing. Don't get me wrong. And we don't necessarily like the direction where it's going in all cases. But one of the things that isn't changing or that hasn't changed is your ability, right? So it is absolutely overwhelming. Melissa said sometimes it helps to remind people that this is temporary. It doesn't feel like it when you're going through it, but truly it's temporary. I hope so. And even if it's not temporary, we have to recognize the only thing that we have is ourselves. Here's what we have. We have our internal abilities to drive change, to be a good example, and to use our successes as examples of the fact that trusting in ourselves is viable. You are here for a reason. You have been hired and sustained your job for a reason, and all of that is success that you should be able to draw on to tackle whatever change comes your way. You are better than the changes that are pushed at you. You are more capable, you are more advanced, and you have the ability to learn. And that ability to learn is that ability to adapt. And adaptation is the only way that we can deal with oppressive change. We have to learn to adapt. And sometimes resist, but adapt more than anything else, right? So this is where I'm at. Deanna, are there any other questions? I really do appreciate everybody here. Deanna, thank you for that. And like I said, we have some good communication courses and things like that that may help you. If you ever want to bring in your team, CEI would love to kind of do like a retreat or something like that where we can kind of address some of these things in a more one-to-one setting. We also offer things like coaching and executive presence coaching and that sort of stuff. So, whatever it is that you need, I would love to work with you. All right, friends, we got about 2 minutes left. I want to hold some space in case. Good day, Carol. All right, friends, we are going to call it. You guys have a great lunch. I know that I will. And we'll see you in our next offering. All right.